Right, welcome back. And definitely every battle has its own army, every army has his own mission. We have our armed forces and police forces, and those are defending and safeguarding the safety and stability of the country. We have our doctors who are in the forefront of this battle with this pandemic, and definitely we have our workers. So a salute for each army of those, a salute to our people who are bearing the brunt and bearing the responsibility. Let me again welcome our guest with us, Dr. Ahmed ELLEISSY, economic expert and writer. Thank you again for being with us. And as you've seen, the president's loads over the Facebook to the laborers of Egypt and to the workers. And let me here take, how do you view Egypt's efforts in order to lift the burden over the workers, particularly during the past time and particularly during the time we're speaking about a global threat?
Let me put it this way. For I don't know how many years, the workers and the laborers have always been saluted and thanked and, you know, given a lot of nice words on Labor's Day on the 1st of May. This year, what happened is something very special. It's much bigger than words. The president has awarded this new insurance policy called Aman for all the workers of Egypt, and there are 13 million of them, okay, who are not under any insurance system. These are the workers who are not, they're like by day, they work by day. They don't have like, they're not on a certain payroll. One day they work here in a factory and then another day they work there. And these were in a very almost dangerous position, because if one of them gets loses his life or you know, gets an accident or something, he doesn't belong to any company. And the government, and this is for the first time in the history of Egypt, the government stepped in and insured 13 million workers. This is the biggest thank you in real. It's not just empty words. It's actions in place. And this is what I think is very special about what President Sisi did this year for the workers.
So we're not speaking just about verbal appreciation, but rather practical one.
Put into action. Numbers speak a million words, they say. When you put numbers on the table, the message gets there.
Yes, and I guess that is very much, but also besides this important, of course, order the president gave, also there were all the protective measures that have been taken for the workers. And there were precautionary measures, and even we recall the president when he was passing by and he saw some of those who were working with no masks, and he stood in the middle of the street asking who is responsible for that and all that. I mean, how far do you see those are measures showing a leadership that is really keen on its labor?
They always say lead from the front, and I think the president has done just that. President of a country, his job is not really to go and check if this guy has put his mask or not. But when the president went down to that particular minute detail, he sent a message to the worker, not only in that site, but all over the country, okay, that safety and taking care of, taking the right precautions against this epidemic is the right thing to do. And it goes all the way up to the head of the state. Okay, there isn't a stronger message that anybody can send to clarify that this is not negotiable. Okay, you have to protect yourself, because actually you're protecting yourself, you're protecting your family, you're protecting the country. And when it comes from the head of the state, there is no higher authority to send a stronger message than this. So I'm sure everyone now knows what he should do when he goes to his work or his site or wherever he's working.
And that is, or would have been my next question, which is, yes, this is how the leadership has acted so far, and this is how the leadership showed how it's keen on its people. What is the role of those labors nowadays at this particular time, at this particular stage, when we are all aware that the Egyptian economy will suffer, as did the whole economies in the whole world?
I might differ with you on that last part, but I'll come to it in a second. Because I don't think we're going to suffer as anybody else. I think we're going to suffer just a little bit less. And I'll tell you why. I think today, as we don't have yet neither a vaccine, neither a cure for this disease or virus, okay? There isn't much that anybody else can do. You can do really three things. You stay home as much as you can. And then when you go to work, you make sure that you put a mask so you don't get infected and you don't infect others. Because one of the trickiest things in this virus is people don't know if they're infected or not. You cannot tell if they're a carrier or not, okay? And you make sure that you wash your hand as much as you can, you know. So if you pick it up from whatever surface, you don't transmit it to yourself by, you know, getting it into your eyes or your mouth. There isn't much anybody can do but these things. If you follow them stricter, as strict as we can, okay, we'll be as safe as possible as of today. Hopefully, within the next coming few weeks or month, we're going to find a vaccine, vaccine or a cure, and then we can vaccinate workers, and then we'll get to a higher level of safety. But today, it's all about discipline. It's not complicated. We're not asking people to do rocket science. Just wash your hands, you know, wear your mask, and you stay away from the large crowds as much as you can.
Before going to how the world look at us, let me here take how we look at our work. And we've seen the president here. I mean, everyone is so very much, all the leaders of the world are very much preoccupied by what is going on. Will they survive the coronavirus? Whether to open up or complete the lockdown. And we have here the president directing the government to resume working on construction of mega projects, and we have him even visiting working sites. So how do you view this? How can we look at this here in Egypt, and how the world should look at this?
I spent the last 30 years of my life working in major multinationals. One of the biggest multinational, I will not say its name, had one of the KPIs, and this was a very, very important KPIs to measure your performance as a manager. It's called handling multiple priorities. If you can only work on one project at the time, you're not such a good manager. When you can work at so many things at the same time, you can do a lot. I think this is exactly what we're doing now in Egypt. We are fighting on so many different fronts and successfully on all the fronts. Okay, so we're having a major, almost revolution of construction everywhere. The new capital, the tunnels under the Suez Canal, so many places are being reconstructed all over. At the same time, we're fighting and we're doing a great job. We're one of the least affected countries with this epidemic. At the same time, unfortunately, we're being faced with terrorism, and we're fighting this as well. And God bless the soul of all those who actually defended us and went away because of this terrorism. So we're working on so many fronts, and this is a real challenge. Not anybody can do this. You know, there are so many countries that got stuck on only one point and the epidemic, and they forgot about anything else. But we have so many different balls in the air, and really it takes a very skilled and wise leadership to be able to do that. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yes, indeed, indeed. And it's not that we are worried very much whether to continue on with the lockdown, whether to continue with a complete lockdown. No, we're speaking that we are living our life.
Lockdown is not a solution, huh? And we've seen it. You know, the countries that locked down, 2 weeks later, they came and then they're screaming because nothing is happening. You know, they need to feed themselves, they need to earn their living, and besides that, putting people just on total absolute lockdown 24/7, this is just claustrophobic. After a while, people really get very annoyed. Look at the escalation in the number of domestic violence you see in so many different countries that decided to lock people down. domestic violence, child abuse, because people are getting so tensed
No,
and they're becoming very agitated.
No,
That we don't have in Egypt.
Well, I hope so, because we are going to work also, but we have to abide with what the government so far has.
We are.
Yes,
Which
because,
is halfway. It's halfway.
Awareness of our citizens to the problem that we are in is essential. And no, it's not just an easy problem. It is a global pandemic.
It is. It is. It's not an easy one.
Yes. And right, let's go back to what we were speaking about. And here the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, expectation of the Egyptian economy. And it said that Egypt is the only country, hopefully, in the Middle East and North Africa region not to go into recession in 2020. First, what's your comment on this? And if that's true, then what is contributing to that?
Speaking of the IMF, the director, her name is, if I'm getting it right, Kristalina Georgieva. She has mentioned actually that Egypt has used the previous loan that we've got, the $12 billion, in such an efficient way that she was really impressed by the way we've managed it. And it's not very complex. The IMF, you work with it as any other company, you have your track record. If your track record is good, you're confirming that you're doing a good job, people are impressed with how you're doing things, you deliver on what you promise and you walk the talk, people will trust you. And I think this is why we are on a very good terms with the IMF now, and even there is a possibility of a discussion, I understand, for another new loan to rebalance some of the effects that we're going to have because of this virus. One of the key industries that got very badly affected, and this is global, is tourism.
Definitely.
And that was an important component of the Egyptian
and transportation
economy.
Also.
Absolutely. And even when this is over, tourism has the tendency to come back slowly. Tourism is that sort of industry that does not, go from 0 to 100. It's what we call a slow burner. So you put it in, and slowly, over 2-3 years after this is over, you're going to go back to the level that where you were. And obviously that was a key source of foreign currency into the economy, which we lost, and so many different countries lost it as well. So I think we will be able, working with the IMF, to replenish that until, it picks up, and it will pick up again. The good thing, and again, as they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. We've been vaccinated as a country from this. Unfortunately, in the past, we had instances where tourism came to a total stop. So it's just one more time. It's not something that we're seeing for the first time. It happened before, so we know how to handle it. It's not pleasant, and yes, that's going to hurt, but we've been there before. We've done it once, we'll be able to do it once more.
Hopefully with God's will, we hope for that. Since we're speaking about the most affected industrial or sectors of the economy that has been affected by the repercussions of the coronavirus, let me also speak about industries, because for the first time the President started to speak about that we need to go on with industry, and that has to go in parallel to all the mega projects or the real estate or the infrastructure, but also industry has to go in parallel with all the other sectors. First, let me know, how do you view this, how important industry should be restarting again and refreshed, and which sectors exactly do we need to refresh, and that would be a payback?
The global context has changed in the last few years. About 10 years ago, everybody was talking globalization, globalization, globalization. Today, this has changed, good or bad, but it's a fact of life. Almost each country want to be great again, or go into its own leadership once more. You see that the right-wing governments are taking over most of the European countries and the key economic powers in the world. One of the key, almost funny situations that the US, for example, found itself in when they came to get the protection material against the epidemic, they found that actually China was their key sourcing country for such equipment. And, that makes you,
confused?
Not confused, but you think about it, what if I can't help myself? Who's going to help me? And I think this is where we are. We need to be able to support ourselves at 100%. Unfortunately, this trip towards, if you could call it the Egyptian Industrial Revolution, started actually in the 1960s. Unfortunately, in the period of the 1970s, we got into the open door policies, and we became a consumption society, producing very little but consuming much more. At the same time, we were almost, how would you say that, holding on the price of the currency, that we had the price of the currency which was totally unreal. And you ended up without feeling it for almost 20, 30 years, that you are subsidizing caviar and smoked salmon, you're importing it from overseas, which doesn't make sense. Okay, when we fixed the exchange rate, and when the currency got floated into real exchange rate, we started to see how much things cost and how much we can afford for the first time in about 30, 40 years. And it became very clear that industry is the solution. We cannot live on importation from other countries, because what we're doing when we do this, what you're just importing, first of all, you're not just depleting your stock of foreign currency, but also you're depleting your jobs. Because actually, if you consume something that was made here, this means you give a job to a certain number of people, depending on whatever it is. Every industry has its own mix, but you're creating jobs here. If you go on importing things that were produced elsewhere, you're actually giving the jobs in that other place. So you're creating unemployment here and creating employment abroad and depleting your foreign reserves. So the right thing, no two ways about it, the right thing to do for this country is to build the industry all over again. Unfortunately, we lost about 30 good years. We could have been much better. But fine, it's behind us. We have to think from where we are today. And the right thing for this country, for the long term, for the survival, because it's not a global village anymore. It's everyone for his own, okay, is to build industry in Egypt.
Before we continue on with our discussion, and certainly the next segment of this episode will be speaking about very important issues, the economic reforms of Egypt, the IMF loan that Egypt has requested, and definitely how Egypt, or what is the look to Egypt's future or foreseen future. Before we delve into our discussion, first let's have this other report. And coming phase offers great opportunity to boost local industry. Let's watch. Right, welcome back. And as we were speaking before the report and the break, and let me here take your assessment to the financial and monetary reforms that were undertaken by Egypt in the past few years, and has kind of given us a lifeline or a breath so we can pass through what we are passing through today.
We had a very big problem. And again, the problem was that we had such an unreal exchange rate. We had to, what does it mean, just for the common person to understand what a real exchange rate means? A real exchange rate means that, you know, the US dollar, for example, at the time cost before the devaluation in 2016, I think it was at about £7. When the real price is 15 and you are selling it at 7, it means that anybody who imports anything at $1 or for £7, the government or the society, all of us, is giving him another $8 on top of his 7 to buy whatever he's buying. If that was for a necessity, you know, for things which are life and death, for wheat to feed the people, I understand. But what we ended up, and as silly as it sounds,
we're speaking here about the unreal inflation rate given to us in terms of how much the Egyptian pound can really buy of goods, and that was not the real one at then.
It is not inflation, it's subsidy, okay? And they are different. Subsidy, it's like a hidden inflation, if you want, okay? But it's not real inflation. What happened is we were subsidizing things that needed not to be subsidized. All the luxury goods, jewelry, you know, whatever clothes, important clothes, you know, they were being manufactured in Bangladesh and Vietnam, sent to the US, and then we rebuy them again at triple the price. It did not make any sense, okay? And it was draining out the resources of the country. We have, and anybody will tell you that Egypt needs to focus on health and education. That's, you know, not a no-brainer.
The foundation of everything.
Absolutely, but we did not have the funds. Why? Because we were, believe it or not, spending it on chocolates and pet food and lingerie and things that, you know, the society did not need at all. If you want to buy these things, okay, if you can afford them, okay, but then you need to pay for them, okay? There is no point that you are the economy is subsidizing you for buying these things. It was such a brave, and let's not shy from the history. You know, the first time that this was tried was in 1977 in Jan, okay, 17 and 18, and then we had the riots.
President Sadat?
Yes, in President Sadat's time, and we had the famous riot, okay, and since then, it was almost a no-go, and nobody wanted ever to...
Nobody dared to take...
I mean, one mistake, you see what's wrong about it, but you don't throw the baby with the bathwater. Okay, this is exactly what was done for 30 years. And now, unfortunately, it was like a pressure cooker. You know, you kept it under pressure for 30 years. And when you open the lid, guess what? Boom. Of course, it was a major shake. But it took so much courage to do it, okay? But it was the right bet. We had no other way to go. And yes, you know, we had a difficult 6 months. Or maybe even a year afterwards. But then things are started to fall in place. Today, if we were where we are today, and we did not do this in 2016, believe in me, we would have been in much, much worse situation than where we are today.
These are the monetary reforms that have been taken
Absolutely.
so far. The fluctuation or the liberalization
Yes.
of the Egyptian pound, and we can really say right now that we are giving the subsidies to the right...
At least we're in control. Before we were not. And then you do whatever you want to do.
And at the same time, we are giving the real rates of inflation, because now the pound is able to buy whatsoever goods, and this is...
More or less, it's real value.
Exactly. Exactly. These are the monetary. How far did this give us right now the chance, or this chance, to be able to overcome this particular stage?
Because we're talking about medical things, let me use the analogy. What we did in 2016 was a major operation, okay? And that big support that we managed very well, but the testimony of the IMF itself, you know, worked very well. Today, we have a headache, so we're taking an aspirin, okay? That small loan that we are discussing with IMF nowadays. If we had not done the operation, And, you know, as they say, no pain, no gain. If we had not went through the agony of, you know, going through the difficult period of getting things, you know, on the right track, today, no aspirin could have fixed it, and no way on earth we could have handled the operation today. We would have been in a very, very difficult position. This is one of the things that you manage by preemption. You cannot wait until you are deep in the soup and you try to solve it. It will never work there. We've done it right in 2016. Of course, nobody knew that, you know, we're going to end up in 2020 with what we have. But thanks God that we did it at the right time. So when we have a problem today, you know, the industry, the tourism industry is a little bit low. So we're going to take a little bit of an aspirin, you know, to get us to bridge this 1 or 2 years of gap, you know, and then until it picks up again.
Since you brought up the issue of the IMF, let's take it. Let's,
sure.
Just on Thursday, the Prime Minister spoke about a new loan from the IMF, where he said that this is not as the previous ones, rather it has its own terms, and it doesn't have any kind of burdens as the ones before, but rather to provide a hedge against the negative impact of the coronavirus. Can we have more details about this issue?
Let's take a step back and understand where did the coronavirus hit us. So we've talked about tourism, 2, petrol, and obviously as a byproduct between this and that, you have the remittance of the Suez Canal, because the whole global trade has went down, and Suez Canal is a key function. You know, it goes in the positive correlation whether if you have a global trade that goes up, Suez Canal has a lot of ships passing by, they pass money, and we have the remittance. If not, then not. So we got hurt on these 3 fronts.
Foreign reserves. All hits us in foreign reserves. Or in the foreign currency coming to us?
Both, because when you don't have the income, you go back to your savings, even as we do in our personal lives, yeah? So we had to go to the savings, and we had to spend money for the savings. So the loan that we're taking is just to fill in this gap. So it's like almost it's not a structural loan. It's almost intermediary. Okay, you're filling a certain gap. It's like, you know, you constructed a house, but then you're painting it. So that loan is the paint. The structure is right, thanks God. It's right, and it's in place now, after we've done the latest reform in 2016. And now we're just, you know, making it look a bit better because we have a little bit of a problem here and there. But this is a short-term problem. And this is very different from having a structural problem is what we had for the past 30 years, and somebody had the courage in 2016 to fix it.
What do you mean by short-term loan?
I'm not talking about the period. I mean the purpose of the loan. There is a global issue, whether from the petrol, tourism, or Suez Canal income. Okay, so we're going to manage with that loan, what I understand at least, is that we're going to use this loan to manage until things go back more or less into normal, and we do not put more pressure on the currency and on our foreign reserves.
So we're speaking about taking this loan in order to protect our foreign currency, preserve what we have gained during the past stage, or at least preserve our gains, our economic gains. Right, but also
and sorry, and most importantly, to not to have to shoot the price of the pound versus the foreign exchange.
Okay. Here also the Prime Minister spoke about this loan as a no burden for people. What did exactly the Prime Minister mean by that?
I think basically what he meant by it is that we were not going to pay, or we're not going to see a huge inflation or a surge in the prices of our everyday goods, which is different from what happened in 2016. Because in 2016, all the goods more or less went up because the currency nature changed. So it was no way on earth that you could keep things at the same prices that they were before you floated the currency. But now he's talking about another loan, but it is operational loan. It's on the macro level that will probably not trickle down into every day of every goods that we use on every day for the normal Egyptian family. This is what I understand from his statement. I hope I'm right.
Remember when we took the IMF and the World Bank loan at the very beginning, remember the statements of the president before even taking such a loan, when he spoke about that we have to go through very tough measures in this upcoming stage, and that we know that they are harsh, we know that we are going to be hurt, and we will have to carry lots of burdens, but we have to. This time, on the contrary, the Prime Minister said, no, it's not like the previous ones, and we're not going to, there are no terms, there are no real conditions as the first ones. So what are we speaking here exactly? What does it mean, an IMF loan with no burden on the shoulders? Does this exist?
I think in the abstraction or in absolute, I don't think IMF gives free money, and nobody else does. But I think once more what he meant by that is that it will not affect our daily lives as the first loan affected our daily life. Let's face it, we have reached a certain level of inflation, if my memory serves me correctly, in the high 30s, right after the devaluation, and that's aggressive. But again, it was not evitable. There is no other solution. We suppressed it for 30 years. At a certain point in time, we had to solve the problem, and thanks God it did not blow up in our face. If we had waited until today, in the conditions that we have today, I don't even want to imagine what situation the country would have been in. This is just a bridging loan. Just a little bit of a loan to manage things and to manage the vacuum that will be created by the huge drop in the price of oil and the Suez Canal income, and once more the tourism. It's just a bridge loan. You will not see the price of a loaf of bread going 3 times, or the medication, multiplied by 2 or by 3. It's just a small loan that the government hopefully will manage it over a medium to a short period of time, and we will not feel it. Okay, the restructure of 2016, everybody felt them.
No, definitely, they were very hard ones.
But they were, again, and really, I mean, I'm not political. I have no political intention, but it was the right thing to do.
Yes, definitely.
And in management, they teach you, the right decisions are not always the popular decision. Sometimes you have to take decisions that are hard and tough, but they are the right one. And this is the best example for that.
And that's why we are able to grasp the repercussions of what's going on.
We're still standing.
Yes, we're still standing. Exactly. Right, so Prime Minister Dr. Madbouli also stated that the coming phase provides an ideal opportunity to boost the Egyptian industrial sector. And we've been speaking about the industrial sector. What is the industrial role in the economy, and what are the industries that we really need to emphasize on at this coming stage?
If you look at the Egyptian economy, at least the latest number I have, which might not be the latest update, but I have numbers, I think 2017, 2018, we are looking at total imports of Egypt at about 60 billion and exports of 23. Okay, the gap is 37 billion US dollar per year. That's almost 15% of our GDP. Okay, this is the answer to your question. The role of the industry is to close this gap, is to
diminish such huge gap.
It is pressure on all of us. Once more, these are jobs that you're giving elsewhere there should be jobs here in Egypt if you produce whatever you're importing. Okay, this is a pressure on your currency because you are depleting your foreign reserve to buy these goods because nobody will sell to you but in foreign currency. The role that the industry needs to play is to close this gap. Okay, and this is not a small gap. 37 billion US dollar is huge. But if you start, one day you'll get there. If you don't do anything, in 10, 15, 20 years, it's going to be still where we are. Okay, I don't know if we can close it in 10 years and 15 years, but if we have the right strategy, would mean that we are on the right road and we'll get there one day. If we don't get the right strategy, we're never going to get it fixed. So I think some of the things you have edges, and these are probably not the top of the list. Okay, I was in a certain forum, and I found that we are importing very strange things. You know, toothpicks. Why on earth are we importing toothpicks? You know, we are importing toothpicks. Believe it or not, you're laughing. Yeah, but we're spending foreign currency on toothpicks. We are taking jobs from Egyptians who could be producing toothpicks, which is a low technology, low energy product. Just a piece of wood, and you, like, you know.
We don't have to describe what to.
Yeah, or the process of it. Okay, why are we wasting money on this? Why are we wasting money on this?
I really.
It does not make sense.
I have no idea.
So these things, okay, probably, you know, things of that sort will, I guess, I don't have the data, so I am guessing it's going to be probably a third of that gap. Okay, so we need to close that. You know what we call the low-hanging fruits, things which are easy to do and fast. There are going to be things which are very complex, and because they require know-how and technology, leave them for later, because later will come one day. Okay, and the role of the industry is we need to close this gap and to be also independent.
What industries do we want really to focus on?
I don't know the absolute answer to that, but I'll give you my first reaction to this. Okay, heavy machineries and cars and like trains and things like this are consuming a very large number of this gap, or they form a very large number of this gap. I know that, you know, people would say, cars, you know, but there are, you know, there are other countries. Think of South Korea 30, 40 years ago. It would have been a joke if you tell somebody, you know, get a Korean car. People would laugh at you. Today, they have leading cars.
Yes.
They are challenging the traditional and long-term, you know, leaders in that industry. So again, you need to start. You're not going to get it right or perfect first time, but start. Okay, once you start, it's going to evolve, and with time, you're going to learn, and you're going to get there.
Yes. Hopefully we're going to get there, and hopefully we're going to pass through those very hard times. That is not just that we are not just endured by Egyptians, but by the whole world.
It will pass.
Yes.
We are a 7,000-year civilization. We had so many problems before. We had major issues over our history, and they all passed. It will pass.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmed ELLEISSY, economic expert and writer. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're most welcome.
And dear viewers, I guess that takes us to the end of this episode. Tomorrow will be another contentious debate with another colleague. Good night.